glad certainly to have the opportunity to be together on the Lord's Day and to commemorate the Lord's death in just a little while. Our readings, we're finishing Daniel, and sent Thursday, Friday, and yesterday, basically Hosea. Hosea was a contemporary prophet to what other major prophet? Remember, it starts with an I, if that helps. Isaiah. And if you'll notice in the first verse, during the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, Hezekiah, kings of Judah, roughly 750 to about 725, and he prophesies to the northern kingdom of Israel. And as Isaiah was wont to do, the problems in the northern kingdom were were many. They're multifaceted. What made their spiritual problems maybe not so bad to them was the fact that geographically they had expanded, all the way over to the Euphrates. Kind of like during the days of Solomon, they had re-expanded. Economically, they were doing well. So they thought they were doing pretty fair. But spiritually, they were bankrupt. And again, Hosea and Isaiah were contemporaneous. Hosea, somebody has said that the themes of chapters 1 through 3 echo throughout the rest of the book. The adultery of Gomer. And by the way, who was Gomer? Yes. What kind of a wife was she? She was a harlot. And it's obvious from the rest of the book that the reason that God wanted Hosea to marry Gomer was in order that he might see really who felt about whom. Exactly. God felt about Israel. And so this fellow has said the themes of chapters 1 through 3 echo throughout the rest of the book. The adultery of Gomer in chapter 1 illustrates the sin of Israel in 4 through 7. And so you've got kind of a symmetry there. The sin of Gomer, 4 through 7, the sins of Israel. The degradation of Gomer in chapter 2 represents the judgment of Israel in 8, 9, and 10. And that seems to be pretty true. And then Hosea's redemption of Gomer in chapter 3 is seen in the picture of the restoration of Israel in chapters 11 through 14. Anyway, I thought that was a very interesting and insightful summary. Hosea's personal difficulties with her certainly becomes a life illustration of what God had experienced with Israel and the love that God had. Homer. I thought about that. I'm not going to say it. Hosea's love and faithfulness for Gomer really illustrates God's faithfulness and his love for Israel. And anyway, those first 3 chapters deal with that. It's interesting. They have some children, and the children represent what's going to happen. Really, what are the names? Lo am I, or Lo am I, which means you're not my people. What was the other? Yes, and what does that mean? What was that? I no longer have mercy. Yes. But then the names would, eventually he said the names would be changed to my people and I will have mercy. And that would be seen through whom? Or through the, Through the bringing in of whom? The Gentiles, as mentioned in the New Testament. All right, chapter 4, it begins 4, 5, and 6. Deals really 4 through 7, I guess, with so many of their sins. In 4, one of the passages has been quoted all my life by different people. Verse 6, my people are destroyed for what? Lack of knowledge. And whom did he blame? The priest for not teaching. And he goes on through a number of ideas what kinds of sins. I mean, there's a laundry list that looks kind of like Romans 1. If you looked at 4 verse 2, the swearing, breaking faith, killing, stealing, committing adultery, like all 10 commandments were broken, and then some. Chapter 5, the people's apostasy, he rebukes them, and then in chapter 6, some of them had said, okay, God might judge us for quickly, but it's going to, it won't be long, and we'll be good for a while. But he says it's just like the dew that goes away early, verse 4 of chapter 6. And then verse 6 is quoted by Jesus on at least two times. Two times we have recorded, Matthew 9 and Matthew 12. I desire what? Mercy and not sacrifice. Well, does that mean sacrifice was never a part of God's plan? No, but their behavior had to correspond with their sacrifices. Kind of like 1 Samuel 15:22, where Samuel told Saul that God, it's very similar to this. Not I desire mercy, not sacrifice. But who can quote that? 1 Samuel 15:22. You remember, Landon, offhand?
I'm trying to think.
Samuel told Saul, yes, to obey is better than
sacrifice.
Right, and to hearken than the fat of rams. For rebellion is as witchcraft and idolatry. When you rebel in one area, it's no different from any other area. Sometimes we look at moral sins as worse than doctrinal sins. They're the same in the sense that they're not the same act, obviously, but they're similar in the sense that they alienate us from God. So I desire goodness, not sacrifice, verse 6, and the knowledge of God more than burnt offerings. Their idea was if we just go to church, just go to temple, just offer our sacrifices, we can do what? Live any way we want. Yes. And then in chapters 8, 9, 4, 5, 6, and 7, we have that. And then 8, 9, and 10, really the judgments, the punishment for Israel's infidelity. In fact, that's in the American Standard heading there. Punishment for Israel's infidelity is seen in these chapters, 8, 9, 10. They reap their retribution. And then in 11, he begins the restoration, and he starts back with how he had actually called them out of what? He looked at Israel as a child, carrying it about by its hands, and he says, when you were a child, I loved him and called my son out of Egypt, going all the way back in their history to God's bringing them out by Moses. And of course, it's applied to whom in Matthew 2? Jesus Christ going into Egypt, and then the coming out after Herod the Great had died. And then in 12, Ephraim is reproved, there were idols and other things. And 13, 14, O Israel, return unto the Lord thy God, 14:1, for thou hast fallen by thine iniquities. Verse 4 of chapter 14, I will heal their backsliding. I will love them freely, for mine anger is turned away from him. And he has some very beautiful physical expressions to describe what would be in the spiritual restoration in the New Testament kingdom. It's interesting, I had jotted down some passages in chapters 1 verse 10 and 2 verse 23. Paul uses that in Romans 9, 25 and 26 to show that God had always intended to bring Gentiles into the world. Yes. And then in 1:9 and 2:23 again, chapter 1 verse 9, Peter uses that to indicate that the Gentiles, same as Paul, the Gentiles had come into God's favor. And then in chapter 11 verse 1, we already alluded to that, used in Matthew 2, out of Egypt that I call my son, spoke of secondary application of Jesus being in Egypt and then coming back into his native land. And then in 6 verse 6, I desire mercy, not sacrifice, Matthew 9 verse 13 and Matthew 12 verse 7. Different occasions, different miracles, but those are passages that are used in the New Testament. I think that's helpful because one thing I didn't think about years ago, and then it kind of came on me, is that New Testament writers never took Old Testament passages out of context, but actually used the context and applied them to similar contexts in the New Testament. And that is, I think, a big help when we appreciate how we deal with Scripture. Okay, comment or question?
What was that verse in Matthew 9?
I'm sorry?
What was the verse in Matthew 9?
Matthew 9, I think it's verse 12, Paula. It's in the... Matthew 9, 13 and 12, 7. Yeah, Matthew 9, 13, 12, verse 7. Okay, very, very good. Okay, let's go. Here we go, in Acts. We are in the, what journey? What number? Second journey. Okay? And as we have gone back, we'll not take much time just to say that we want to try to... When I was younger, as Mr. Ratliff sometimes says, when I was young and dumb, I would think, okay, I've got that chapter down. Now let's go to the next one and forget about that. Our understanding should be cumulative. We want to build, like, we learn the ABCs, and then we learn little words like at and cat, bat, and then we put together a little bit longer. Then we string two words together, and we have a sentence, subject, verb. And then 3 words together. And before you know it, we got a longer sentence. Before you know it, we got a paragraph. But we never forgot our ABCs. Everything was built on that. And that's kind of like our Bible understanding. We want to try to remember as much as we can and try to relate, put in perspective what we have studied to where we are, and then even if we read on, how what's happening now relates to the rest. Like Barnabas, chapter 4. He just mentioned his having a field and sold it and brought the proceeds, laid it at the apostles' feet. Well, that's a neat idea. But wonder why Luke mentioned Barnabas there. He's going to be what? Very significant to the rest of the Bible, to the rest of the New Testament. And so you have those introductions. I'm reminded, and I don't need to go off on this, but just to throw it at you. In Genesis 4, the last couple of verses, after we talk about, we learn about Cain and Abel, and then the descendants of Cain, the 7 generations are listed. And then we go back to Adam and Eve, and they had another son, Cain, Abel, and Seth. And it says, and then began men to call on the name of the Lord. Well, lo and behold, in chapter 5, you have the descendants of Adam through Seth. And it's through Seth's descendants, of course, that, Jesus would come. And so you just kind of see that those flows or tiers. We have this topical layer of understanding, then when we see how it goes together, then there are tiers of understanding as we go. TIERS, as you know. Okay, let's go. With the first journey primarily in southern Galatia, and then the problem at Antioch was that the Jewish people who had been converted in Jerusalem came up and feigned as if they had been sent by some of the apostles and elders in Jerusalem, and said the Gentiles had to be circumcised and keep the law to be saved. So we have Paul, Barnabas, Titus, and others going to Jerusalem about that. And then 1536 through 1822 is the second journey. I've doctored this chart just a little this morning. Try to remember places emphasized in conversions in each chapter. Where we are now in chapter 16, we want to remember that the emphasis, while every word is important, the emphasis seems to be Paul's work in Philippi. Conversions of Lydia, and then who? The Jacob. And then he goes to, Amphipolis, Apollonia, then he comes to Thessalonica. Then you've got some inspired ink, so to speak, that is used to describe Thessalonica. And then from Thessalonica on to where they were more noble than those in Thessalonica, Berea. Then south down to the ancient cultural What'd you say? Athens, that's right. And so you got, Philippi 16, Thessalonica, Berea, Athens in 17. And then in 18, he goes and starts his lodging with Aquila and Priscilla in Corinth. So we have emphasis in Corinth. And of course, those cities will be significant to the rest of the Bible story, and especially the letters that Paul will write. But not that he didn't preach and convert people in other places, but those are emphasized. And then we have the end of the second journey, possibly the beginning of the church at Ephesus. And we showed this map last week. I added some stuff I wanted to show you briefly of the spread of Christianity during the first century, and specifically Paul's second journey. He starts at Antioch with Silas, and Barnabas and John Mark go where? To Cyprus, right? All right, they go on. We'll see that they come to Lystra and find Timothy, and they go on through the regions of Phrygia, Galatia. It's not mentioned, but likely they would have gone through Iconium and Antioch. And then they come over to Troas. They wanted to go up into Asia and Bithynia, but the Spirit of God forbade it. So they come to Troas, pick up a loop, and then set a straight course through Samothracia, come to Philippi, and then on to Thessalonica, to Athens, Corinth, then back to over to Ephesus, then down to Caesarea, salutes the church in Jerusalem, and back up. The reason I'm going over that is just the more you just, you say it, you're thinking ahead of me. Well, he goes there, and then before Owen says this, I know he's going to go over there. And you just got it just as hard as concrete in your mind. We've talked about that. I wanted to come back, and Lee had brought up Wednesday night the idea about the difference in my mount in the workbook and the mount here, that likely the mount in the workbook, the mount here that's in the Waldron material that Scotty Richardson put together is more accurate. And because there was the mountain chain, I so wish Lee would fit about it, but the mountain chain went like this, in kind of a southwest and northeast, known as the Taurus Mountains. And there was, I was thinking early this morning, I was in a meeting in eastern Kentucky years ago, and the fellow I was staying with, he and his wife, took me to the Galps National Park. It's in the Cumberland Mountains, some of the prettiest area I've ever seen. But the Galps there was where Daniel Boone in 1775 had gone through. And it was just a natural break, because all these steep, rugged mountains, you can't just go straight up, especially if you got wagons and provisions and all that. And there was a natural break. Well, that's what I'm about to show you here. Here is Tarsus, Tarsus of Cilicia. They would have come from Antioch through Syria, then Cilicia, and likely through here. And this red line represents what would have been the Cilician gates going through the Taurus mountain chain. And I had some pictures that I found that I thought, this is part of the past, and it's doubtless that Paul and Silas would have gone through these areas. This was taken years ago. The Cilician gates with an inscription dating from the reign of Caracalla. You can just see how rugged these mountains were, and that there's a small road. In fact, I read where there was a narrow gauge railroad that was placed in there. Here's another picture. This is actually in William Ramsey's book on Paul's labors, Cilicia, Tarsus, and the Great Taurus Pass. And the point of emphasis I wanted to make on this is that the struggles and difficulties faithful, dedicated servants of God such as Paul and Silas faced in efforts to preach to others. And it was known, we mentioned Wednesday night, for hideouts of all kinds of bad men, criminals, robbers. And Paul likely, I'll say likely, referred to this in 2 Corinthians 11 when people were denying his apostleship. He said, in journeyings often, in perils of rivers, in perils of robbers, in perils from my countrymen, in perils from Gentiles, in perils of the city, wilderness, the sea, among false brethren, in labor and travail, and watchings often, in hunger, in and thirst and fastings and cold and nakedness. It's just a laundry list of difficulties that he was willing to endure to try to preach the gospel to these people. So if you just Google Taurus mountain chain and then put a view, you can put even views of the Taurus mountains from Tarsus, and you'll come up with a number of pictures that I didn't incorporate in all this. Okay, so we left, we went through the mountains, and we talked about it Wednesday night, to Lystra. And who do we find at Lystra? Timothy. Right, he picks up Timothy, and I showed you a few pictures, I don't think it was Wednesday, but here is a mound on which Lystra had been. It's in what's now south central modern day Turkey. Paul preached there on his first journey, and that's where the citizens thought Paul and Barnabas were what? Were gods. And then when the Jews stirred them up, they took them outside the city and stoned them. But here Timothy was reared by a Jewish mother with the help from her mother, or Timothy's grandmother. And they had a great father. Here's another view of the mound where Lystra was. And I couldn't help but think about the passages in 2 Timothy 1 and 2 Timothy 3. He starts in verse 3 about how he was thankful, having been reminded of the unfeigned faith that was in Timothy, which dwelt first in his grandmother Lois and his mother Eunice or Eunice, and I'm persuaded in thee also. And then later, so somewhere, in this vicinity, when you think about it, here was Timothy, and the fact of his divided parentage. And then in the 3rd chapter, he said, he was saying, abide thou in the things which thou hast heard, and that's here. But anyway, he reminds Timothy of the persecution, sufferings, and then he specifically mentions things that happened on the first journey. What things befell me at Antioch, Iconium, at Lystra. What persecutions I endured. And out of them all the Lord delivered me. Yea, all that will live godly in Christ Jesus shall suffer persecution. And then a couple verses later, but abide thou in the things which thou hast learned and hast been assured of. Your mama and your grandmother taught you right. And when I came along, I taught you how all that was fulfilled in the gospel. Knowing of whom you've learned them. We love you. We love you. We have your best interest at heart. And know and remember that from a babe you've known the sacred writings, able to make you wise unto salvation. You can learn the ins and outs of how God wove the whole scheme, beautiful tapestry of salvation that ended in Christ. And you can have confidence of faith in Christ through all that's gone before. What would the sacred writings be for Timothy?
The Old Testament.
The Old Testament. Wouldn't have been Romans. They didn't have that yet. And so it would have been the Old Testament. Well, anyway, that's that. And we looked at Timothy was from Lystra. Mixed parents religiously, converted at Lystra on Paul's journey, was well aware of Paul's persecutions. Okay, so he picks up Timothy, and then we go on to Troas. Comment or question on that? I did all the talking. Yes, sir. Did you go? Anybody? Yes, sir.
Is Lystra where they shook the dust off their feet?
I think that was, yeah, I know that was Antioch. Let's see. Yeah, this is Acts 13, verse 51. They shook off the dust of their feet and came into Iconium. It was Antioch.
They went back to Antioch later.
Evidently, well, likely they did. It doesn't say they did, just through the region of Phrygia and Galatia. But having mentioned that, they likely would have gone, because one of the purposes that Paul mentioned he wanted to accomplish was to establish the strength and the breadth.
Yeah, and that was pretty much the likely the road through there anyway.
Yes, that's right. Exactly right. Okay, we were in 16, and we had read through those first 5 verses Wednesday night, where we took Timothy. And so then in 6 through 10, we have Paul going through the regions of Phrygia and Galatia, coming down to Troas. Let's read that. Richard, if you would, 6 through 10.
When they had gone throughout Phrygia and the region of Galatia, and were forbidden of the Holy Ghost to preach the word in Asia. After they were come to Mysia, they essayed to go into Bithynia, but the Spirit suffered them not. And they, passing by Mysia, came down to Troas, and a vision appeared to Paul in the night. There stood a man of Macedonia, and prayed him, saying, Come over into Macedonia and help us. And after he had seen the vision, we endeavored to go into Macedonia, assured the gathering that the Lord had called us for to preach the gospel unto them.
Okay. You know, it's interesting that when he gets to Philippi, or he goes on into Macedonia, Philippi being a major city there, that Lydia will be the first convert that we have recorded, and she was a woman of Thyatira, back from one of those 8 areas that the Spirit had forbidden Paul to enter, because he knew that, which kind of answers to the idea that ask and it shall be given to you. Seek and ye shall find. Knock and it shall be open to you. And here God knew that there were honest souls in Philippi who needed the gospel. And one was even from an area that they wanted to go to, but she wasn't there. She was over in Philippi. And so it's interesting. I think they were led, obviously, miraculously by the Spirit then. But providentially, I think the same thing occurs now. When people genuinely want to know, I think the Lord will make a way for them to know the truth based on those passages and others as well. All right, number 10. The journey through these regions must have taken several months. It's evident that Paul wanted to preach further in Asia, and he later would. But why were they forbidden at this time? Note 16, 9, and 10. Well, what happens in Macedonia when they get there? What, Josh? I saw you nodding your head. What happened when they get there? Is it?
Well, intentionally, I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. Anybody? What happens?
What happens in Macedonia is they
Yeah.
begin to preach the gospel in Philippi.
Yes, and as a result of that, you have a lot of conversions. Yes, greater need in Macedonia at that time. I mentioned in the note, Paul desired to continue in the Roman consular province of Asia, comprising Phrygia and the Aegean districts of Mysia, Lydia, and Caria. Concerning what composed Asia, the same source says the term Asia is used in the New Testament does not refer to the continent of that name, or even to the whole of Asia Minor. 4 districts of Western Asia Minor, Caria, Lydia, Mysia, and Phrygia, were united as the province of Asia. The provinces of Bithynia and Pontus were located on the southern shore of the Black Sea. Pfeiffer in his book, in his atlas. Here you see the Black Sea. That's very far north. Cold weather up there. So they wanted to go up here to Bithynia. You see it behind my. Let's see if I can do this. There we go. Here's Bithynia. Here's Phrygia. And here's Asia. And so they were divided geographically and politically. So we're going over through this area, and some believe that of course, the routes that are drawn by various maps depend on the thinking of the what's a map drawer called?
Calligrapher. Topographer.
Topographer. Yeah, I think it's a topographer. That still doesn't sound right. Anyway, some have him coming through Hierapolis and coming this way and then coming up to Troas. Not by Ephesus, but by a different route. But whatever the case was, that's, in one sense, it's immaterial. The real point is he's getting to people who want the gospel and would obey it once they heard it. Number 11, from where did Paul receive his vision in the night? Troas. And he saw a man of Macedonia saying what? Come over and help us. And from whatever vision, however the Lord did that in a vision, they concluded that God wanted them to preach there. Mentioned in the note, this was an important harbor on the eastern shore of the Aegean. It also had important historical associations, being near the Troy of Homer's epics. It was not Troy, but it was near that. Furthermore, there's a difference in the pronouns now used. What is to be made of the change from they in 6 and 7 and 8 to we in 10 through 17? What's that? Luke joins them. There you go. You notice that in verse 8, passing by Mysia, they came to Troas. And there was a man of it. And when he, verse 10. And so setting sail, verse 11, through from Troas, we made a straight course. So there's the change in pronouns. And later on in Acts, there's a change back to they, which indicates that Luke remained. What was that, brother?
That he stayed.
That he stayed wherever the last place was, where he mentioned we and us. All right. That reminds us of a song we sing. Gene mentioned it the other night. We have heard the Macedonian call today. Send the light. Send the light. What number is that? Does anybody know offhand? You know what number it is, Landon, offhand? Send the light. I had thought it might be nice to sing at least a verse of it. Send the light. We don't sing it as much. It's 544. 544 in your songbooks. There's a call comes ringing over the restless way. Well, did they have to go by boat over into Macedonia?
Yep.
Yes, they did. They're in the northern part of the Aegean. It's ringing over the let's just sing the first. Let's sing the first and last stanza. There's a call comes ringing o'er the restless way. Send the light, send the light. There are souls to rescue, there are souls to save. Send the light, send the light, send the light. The blessed gospel light, let it shine from shore to shore. Send the light, the blessed gospel light, let it shine forevermore. Let us not grow weary in the work of love. Send the light, send the light. Let us gather jewels for a crown above. Send the light, send the light, send the light. The blessed gospel light, let it shine from shore to shore. Send the light, the blessed gospel light, let it shine forevermore. Old song, isn't it? We don't sing it all that much, but think about that when we think about these passages when we sing it. All right, we're moving on then.
Philip?
Yes, sir.
You know what you've been talking about, this one is logistics.
Yeah.
Get from here to there. If you put a map of Alabama with most of the shows up there at the Strait of Hormuz, then Alabama would cover up
Yes.
that area that they were traveling. And so you thinking about
Hundreds.
Alabama that we're familiar with,
Yes.
the trees and hollows and rivers and
Yeah.
streams, walking from
Yeah.
over in southeast Alabama to northwest
To
Alabama.
northwest. It'll take a few days.
You know, those
Months.
roads have been trod for thousands of years.
Yes. Yeah. Even the Cilician gates were known back 1000 BC. Before that, actually. I read on some of that where you had Philip of Macedon would have come through that area. Alexander the Great, in his going eastward, would have gone through those regions.
you know, when it mentioned people like Simon of Cyrene,
Yes.
what difference did it make where, you know?
Yeah.
But
Makes-
it says it.
It does. The very mention of it indicates some kind of association or difficulties that they had to overcome. Yeah, that's exactly right. You know, thinking about the Cilician Gates and what I couldn't help but think as I was putting this together about Daniel Boone in 1775, going through the Cumberland Gap there in the, it just, oh, those fellows were so hardy. They took so much for them to do what they did. I feel like I think knowing, if we just knew a smattering of history, it ought to make us appreciate the good things that are just so common to us. Running water, electricity, coolness in the summer, heat in the winter. I mean, things that we take for granted, they didn't have. And life was a struggle just to survive. Somebody sent me something about Cades Cove up in the Smokies, one of my favorite places. It's been so long since I've been there. I just marvel that those fellows that came in and their families that came into the cove there in the Appalachian Mountains, how they, well, you know what happened when some of them got sick? They died. A lot of women died in childbirth. And we need to be appreciative, and I think many of us are, but we live in the lap of luxury, really, and so far as human history is concerned. And we just need to appreciate, be thankful for it, and never have the idea, I deserve it. That's just so far out.
They come back through those mountains again.
That's right. That's exactly right. Every time he would go through Syria and Cilicia and pass toward the west, he would have to go through. That's exactly right. I mean, good point.
You write about history. You ask a young kid today, say, how did Sherman get to Atlanta? And they'll say, down I-85.
Yeah. We were talking about the other day, when a young fellow was asked, where's bacon come from? He said, Kroger's. It's just, no concept of how difficult things can be. All right, let's move on. We got about 5 minutes. We come down to Philippi, and we have some information about the city, and then specifically we have the conversion and some things about the conversion of Lydia at her house that are helpful in showing how really what happens when we're converted. Let's read on here, 11 through 15. Sister Eleanor, if you would, 11 through 15, chapter 16.
Therefore, loosing from Troas, we came with a straight course to Samothracia, and the next day to Neapolis, and from thence to Philippi, which is the chief city of that part of Macedonia, and a colony. And we were in that city abiding certain days. And on the Sabbath we went out of the city by a riverside, where prayer was wont to be made. And we sat down and spake unto the women which were there. And a certain woman named Lydia, the seller of purple, of the city of Thyatira, which worshipped God, heard us, whose heart the Lord opened, that she attended unto the things which were spoken of Paul. And when she was baptized, and her household, she besought us, saying, If ye have judged me to be faithful to the Lord, come into my house and abide there. And she constrained us.
All right. So we have the specific conversion of Lydia, a seller of the city of Thyatira, a city of seller of purple, one who worshiped God. And then notice the verbs. She heard us, whose heart the Lord opened. And the question comes, well, how did the Lord do that? Miraculously? Well, she heard Paul and Silas. And based on the hearing, her heart was open to give heed to the things that were spoken. And then she was baptized along with her household. And then her hospitality is seen in what follows. I wanted to mention a couple of things here. In Philippi would have been a major highway that will have a big amount known as the Ignatian Way. In fact, this is part of the ancient stones alongside the concrete embankment of a modern highway, which follows the same path. Here is a view from the Acropolis and the ruins of the city of Philippi. The Forum would be in the foreground, the marketplace and the basilica in the background, and the Ignatian Highway ran through the center of the city. And that was a major thoroughfare, kind of like I-65 runs through Birmingham. These major highways. And you know, I made this point before, and I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but it's so interesting and fascinating, faith building really, that the Romans engineered these roads along the Appian Way, the Ignatian Way. There were other major highways and paved them with stone, primarily for military use. Primarily for military use. However, with the Roman statutory laws for the citizenry to move about, what is it called? Pax Romana, the peace of Rome. They could go anywhere they wanted as Roman citizens. It was so perfect for the dissemination of the gospel in the first century, which brings us back to Galatians 4:4. In the fullness of the times, God sent forth his Son, born of a woman, born under the law, that he might redeem them that were under the law, that we might receive the adoption of sons. And so here we have the time, all of these world conditions. The Greek language was it would have been the second language of everyone, like English is today. The highways, postal system, everything was just perfect at that time for the gospel, for Christ to come, die, and the gospel to go. But these roads enabled people like Paul and Silas and others to go a little easier from one place to another. This is a river that runs approximately 3/4 of a mile west of the center of Philippi. And tradition states this is where, we don't know that, but there was a river, and Paul went by the riverside, and a river in which Lydia and possibly the jailer were baptized, Gangetes, the modern outdoor chapel and what is said to be the site. Well, again, they don't know that for sure, but tradition would suggest it. These are all pictures of the same small river, madder root from which purple dye would be made. And you think about Lydia being a seller of purple. A carpet using yarn dyed from the madder root purple. Okay, we'll come to that in just a minute. Let's answer some of our, we got maybe a minute. Paul and his companions, number 13. Paul and his companions left Troas and ran a straight course to Samothrace, and the next day to Neapolis, and from there on to Philippi, which is a city of Macedonia. By the way, they were in European soil at this time. So here's the gospel going from the Middle East, and now they're in Europe. Macedonia was the home of Alexander the Great, who during his life had a mission of his own, taking Greek culture to the east. And then Pfeiffer made the point, under the Romans, Macedonia was divided into 4 districts with capitals at Amphipolis, Thessalonica, the residence of the provincial proconsul, Pella, the birthplace of Alexander the Great, and Pelagonia. From Troas to Philippi would have been approximately 125 miles. Brother Gene was talking about just picturing a map of Alabama in this area, 125 miles. That's a little bit farther from here to Athens. Athens is about 120. Between Athens, Alabama, and the state line, Elkmont, Alabama, would be about 125 miles. And so you think walking most of this distance, and of course they did some by boat. From Neapolis to Philippi, Paul and his companions would have traveled the Ignatian Way, a military and commercial highway the Romans built that went from Neapolis on the shore of the Aegean through Thessalonica and on to the Adriatic Sea, thus linking the Aegean with the Adriatic. What famous German leader built a similar road system through Germany? Hitler. And what was it called? The Autobahn. And what one of our, to me, a great general and president, started our interstate system, Eisenhower. And so you have the Roman ways, the road system in Germany, the Autobahn, primarily to land planes and move military, but it allowed people to, and then Eisenhower wanted the same thing. I remember reading years ago that in some areas of our freeway system, there'll be, it'll be straight and there won't be any overpasses. Guess why? That allows planes to land if necessary to take troops in our country if need be. So all of those things that were that's helpful to us. I mean, I use the freeway to get here. But all those systems that have a history behind them are fascinating.
And then those people in that day and time, especially those who lived on the seacoast, they knew Philippi was there.
Yeah.
They knew Athens was there. It's like we know that Athens, Alabama is up there, and you go up there and there's the Tennessee River, and over here is Gadsden and Anniston. We know about it. Some people may not have even driven up there. But,
exactly.
People in Mobile know it's there.
They know it's there because of maps and people who've been there. Exactly right. I remember Dad saying he was 17 years old before he got out of Birmingham. And that was on a train bound for Great Lakes, Illinois, in the Navy. All right. Comment or question? Yes, sir.
Some of these cities, like the last one you had up there, it doesn't look no bigger than the Civic Center down in Birmingham.
Yeah, they would have been a little bigger than that, but the larger cities like Ephesus would have had maybe 250,000 people in it. And they base that usually on the fact that the amphitheaters usually could contain about 1/10 of the population. And so then they deduce from that about the size of the city itself. Okay, yes, sir.
Did she sell purple cloth or purple dye?
Seller of purple.
Would that have been the purple dye or the purple cloth?
I think the answer is yes. Probably both, Brother Fair, and I don't know. I don't really know. Just probably things that were dyed with it that
Yeah,
she
we
was
were looking where that purple dye come from. The vest, they said, came from shellfish.
shellfish. Yes,
But it
exactly.
took a lot of shells to get that much dye.
A lot of shells gave their lives to make something look pretty. Yeah. All right. Thank you. Good point.